Okay, yeah. So thank you guys all for coming and joining us in your evening, taking time out of your Tuesday to be with us. So today we're going to talk about social emotional learning, and I feel like this is just like a big topic in conversations around education right now, especially with the age group that we have, 3 to 6, and even the toddlers. And so I think the term social emotional learning is thrown out a lot, but it isn't always like defined. So, like, what does that actually mean? So it doesn't actually have like a set definition. I think it's a pretty new concept that is being explored in a lot of different areas right now. So you'll find varying definitions of it, across different platforms. But it basically refers to the process through which people, and not just children, but all of us, because we're all still learning how to process our emotions, and we're all learning, even as adults, how to do that. But for children, it's the process that they acquire and apply the knowledge and skills they need to do a lot of different things, like develop a healthy sense of self, how to manage their emotions, how they can achieve like personal and collective goals, so how they can work with others, um, learning how to feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain supportive relationships, and how they can communicate effectively to share their emotions with others. And so we'll go into like why is this important? So it's something that everyone is doing really early in life. Social emotional development begins as soon as they're able to start talking and start understanding what they're feeling. So the earlier, I think that you can be really intentional with how you're explaining like emotions and explaining how to navigate them at an early age, just really helps build success for them in the future. So, because having strong social emotional skills allows them to have the skills to cope with a variety of challenges. So that can look, it'll look really different when they're 3 versus when they're 7 versus when they're 15 versus when they're an adult. So we want to start building those skills now so that as they get older, it's easier for them to face those challenges and to process those feelings. And in a school setting, at least, I think I've said this to a lot of parents, but feeling calm and feeling settled and feeling that kind of like inner peace is so essential to learning. Because if you think about it, like children, it's really hard to learn if you're angry, if you're upset. Like, I don't want to get a lesson if someone's making me mad. It's really hard to focus on what I'm being taught if I have a feeling that I'm not able to express or to manage. So it's really important. Like, the first thing that we want to do every day is make sure everyone does feel calm and settled. And if there is something going on, then we want to address that first before we try to jump into any kind of like lessons or learning, because it's really hard to do that when you're not feeling well. Even as an adult, like if you're feeling frustrated or stressed or tired or, upset about something, it's really hard to then like have a big conversation where you're trying to take in new information when you're distracted by things. So that's kind of our approach to it, why we think it's so important. It's just something that really sets them up for success as they get older. And so there's kind of 5 like pillars, or like 5 like core competencies of social emotional learning. And we'll go through each of these throughout this presentation, and they kind of build on each other. So the first one is self-awareness. The second is self-management. The third is responsible decision-making. The fourth is social awareness. And then the fifth is relationship skills. So the way I look at it, it's kind of like you have to have, 1 before you can go to 2. You have to have 2 before you can go to 3, because they're all related. And it's really hard to have like great social awareness if you're not even aware of, your own self and your own internal feelings. But we'll talk more as we go through it. So we'll start with self-awareness. That's kind of like the most basic one to start with. It can apply I think this is the easiest to start applying early, even with toddlers and our younger, like 2.5 and 3s. So self-awareness is just the ability to recognize, your own emotions, thoughts, and values, and to start to understand how they might influence your behavior. So some of the kind of internal questions that we might not, children may not be like consciously thinking it in the front of their mind, but kind of the idea that we want them to be processing is like, how do I know and understand myself, my thoughts, my emotions? What are the ways I feel in different situations? And how do I understand myself and how I fit into my family, community, and the broader world? So all of those are, children at this stage of development are still very self-centered. And I don't mean that in like a mean way. They're still learning about the world, and they're still learning about themselves in the first place. So we have to start there, where they're at. Just like we say in Montessori, even like in the classroom, we want to meet the child where they are. And so most children are kind of in that phase of figuring out who they are in the world, how they process things, and what they feel about different situations. So there's a lot of different ways that we can support self-awareness. I think the most important, most like basic thing that everyone can do is to teach the vocabulary for emotions. So being able to identify emotions, the child has to be able to say like, I feel sad, I feel mad, I feel frustrated. And there's lots of different ways to introduce that language for those feelings. I know one thing that we do and that I think everyone can do is to model your own emotions. So it's perfectly valid for you to say, say like you're at home with your child and it's been a long day, and you say, like, work was really hard today and I'm feeling really tired and we have so much stuff to do. Like, I'm just feeling a little bit frustrated right now. And you can also go in a positive route. Like, even when you're feeling really good, if you're really happy about something, say like, oh, like, someone was so nice to me at work today and I was really happy because I got to talk with one of my friends, and I was so excited to see you when I picked you up from school. Like, I'm feeling really, XYZ positive emotion there. So modeling is really important, and then this can also be done through books, through stories. I know there's like different little like almost flashcard resources with like different like pictures of children with different emotions like being read on their face, and they'll have a label. So there's things for like proud or excited or nervous. I think just having that vocabulary in the air is really important so that children can absorb it and take it in for themselves. And so then they're able to later say, like, I'm feeling really frustrated, I'm feeling really glad, I'm feeling really proud. Being able to name those emotions is kind of the first step into self-awareness. And then you can also have conversations about what different emotions feel like, because I think we kind of forget as adults, but children really feel things in their body. Like when they're sad, like there might be like a weight that they kind of feel in their chest, or when they're angry, they might feel like their body might feel hot, or when they're happy, like they might feel like they need to move and jump. So kind of making that association between, well, like, how's your body feeling right now? Like, are you feeling like, does your tummy have butterflies in it? Is your tummy upset? Like, maybe you're feeling nervous. Or if they're able to name kind of what's happening in their body, then that can help you give them the vocabulary for what they might be feeling, because they might not know. And it's something that they just have to learn and have the names for. And then I think another really, really important thing is focusing on a growth mindset that emphasizes the effort they put in and the work they're doing rather than just the results. So, they might be really frustrated trying to build something, And you can say, like, I see you're putting in a lot of really hard work to do that. I know you might feel frustrated, but I can see the work you're doing, and maybe I can help you. Maybe you can offer solutions in that time to kind of assist them in what they're doing. But focusing on the work they're putting in and the effort they're putting in is really helpful in kind of building up that sense of self, rather than focusing on, like, oh, like, you're smart, like, you can do it, because that really focuses on the end result and the kind of, like, external product of getting that praise of, like, oh, I'm smart, like, I should be able to do XYZ. When sometimes, like, all our children are very smart, and it's okay still to be smart and to not know how to do something or to need more help doing something. So focusing on, like, their efforts as a person and the work they put in is really helpful in building up their, like, self-confidence and their self-awareness of themselves, of, like, I'm a hard worker, I can do it even though it's hard, even though I'm smart, like, I still have to put in the hard work. And then, so once they're able to identify those emotions and they have the language and they have kind of the confidence to know, like, I can name my emotions, I know I'm, this type of person who can do all these things, it's really important to talk about so we know the emotions, now what do we do with them? And that kind of takes us into self-management. So self-management is the ability to successfully regulate their emotions, thoughts, and behaviors in different situations. So that might look like managing stress, controlling impulses, and motivating themselves to do something. And I want to just emphasize, where we're all learning right now. So these are kind of the things we can do to help promote these things, but obviously we don't expect, a 4-year-old to, like, be completely self-regulated and to completely know how to manage stress and to never have a big emotion. It's completely age appropriate and normal for them to still be working through this stuff. It's what they're, like, this is kind of their big work right now, is learning how to do these things. But obviously we don't have the expectation of them that they can just, like, do it on their own automatically. That's what we're here for, is to help teach them and to help guide them through learning more about how they can do that for themselves. But it takes a long time and it takes a lot of guidance and assistance. But so going back to self-management, so kind of those internal questions we want them to be maybe thinking in the back of their minds is, like, how do I behave? How do I behave in different settings? How do I act at school versus how do I act at the grocery store or at, my older siblings' school or with my grandparents? Like, how do I act in those different settings? And then how do I manage my feelings after I've identified them? What do I do with them? And so we want them in a grander scale to consider, like, how can I turn that awareness of my feelings and my emotions into positive actions so that I can have agency and advocacy for myself. So some ways that we can support their self-management. One thing we do at school that is really helpful, and I really encourage everyone to do at home, is to create, like, a regulating space or, like, a calm down corner, which is different than, like, a timeout corner. We don't use timeouts at school because if you think about it, like, a child being, sent out or sent, into, like, a timeout space doesn't really give them the tools to reflect on what's happening and reflect on how they're feeling. I think it just kind of creates a sense of, like, negative punishment. Like, I'm feeling something and I don't know what to do with it, and that's bad. And maybe, like, I'm bad for not knowing what to do in that situation, which is not what we want them to feel or what we want them to think. Our intention with having, like, a calm down space is to give them literally the space to like help calm their bodies down, and then we can have a conversation about what's happening. So we have different, we have like, it's a yoga mat with like different yoga cards so they can get their minds kind of away from whatever their big feeling is and kind of get their body regulated. Because when their body is regulated, it's a lot easier for them to then start thinking, okay, like, how am I feeling? What should I have done? What can I do next time, et cetera, et cetera. And we have different little tools in there, like different like little fidget toys or like things to squeeze, or like, I don't know if you guys remember from school, but those like little oil timers that like drip colors down in different colors. Just something to help regulate their body before they can regulate their mind. And we're also really big on just like breathing. So when a child is having a big emotion, we'll like take deep breaths together, or we'll encourage the child to like have a deep breath. And that usually is really, really helpful when they are having a big feeling. Another really effective tool that we use a lot is role playing different scenarios. So we do them through like grace and courtesy lessons. So we might ask the children at like morning circle to like, we'll give everyone an opportunity to practice like, what can you say when someone does something nice for you? Or what can you say when someone's doing something that bothers you? So they all get the opportunity to explore that and see like, what would I do in that situation? What would other people do in that situation? And it just kind of gives them the space to experiment with different reactions and different options of ways you can respond to people. A common theme, I think, throughout this will be books, reading books with different emotional themes. You know, there's themes where there's books where like the character is mad about something, or they're sad about something, or they're feeling, you know, like XYZ emotion. And that just kind of gives another opportunity for the child to hear a story where someone was feeling something that they might have felt before. And it gives them the opportunity to see, like, how did that character handle that situation? Maybe I can do that in the future. And also just like making conversation with your child and asking them to think through different emotions and responses at like a neutral time. So like nothing's happening, like they're in a good mood, they're just playing, and you can like totally make it a game of, you know, what would you do if you were mad, or what would you do if you were sad? Doing it at a neutral time helps them like actually really hear what you're asking, and allows them to really think about what would they do without like the heat and intensity of, you know, maybe having an actual big feeling. It's really hard to think through all those different options when you are like actively upset. So a neutral time is best for that. So our goal is to teach children that they have the control over themselves, to take a breath, to take a moment, and think about what they're going to do. It's hard, but our goal is to help them, you know, slow down and really take a moment before reacting to something, which is hard, and it takes practice, and it takes a lot of conversations around emotions and feelings and options. But with enough practice and enough of that time, you do start to see a really big difference, and you do start to see children really pause before just like automatically, you know, exploding to a big feeling. So the next kind of building block on top of self-management is social awareness. So they have the internal awareness, they have the ability to kind of regulate those internal emotions, and now we kind of want to bring them out of themselves and into what other people are feeling. So social awareness is the ability to take the perspective and empathize with other people, especially including diverse backgrounds and cultures. And it also includes the ability to understand like social norms and ethical norms for their behavior. So that's kind of what I was saying before of like, how do I act when I'm in one place versus a different place. You know, different settings have different kind of like social rules. So we want them to like start being able to consider those different behaviors. And the questions we want them to start thinking of are, you know, what is the other person feeling? What might the other person do? And then they can also kind of reflect back and think, like, how would I feel in that situation? If I was in, you know, so and so's shoes, how would I feel? And so they can kind of start to consider the world around them and the people around them. So there's lots of ways to support social awareness too. One thing we really emphasize, especially at this like age range, is to be super specific about like, look at their face, like look at this person's face, look at their body, look at their facial expressions, and to try to discern the differences. So this is another thing that can be like turned into a game. We do this sometimes like at circle time where we'll ask like, okay, can everyone make a mad face? And then they all make their little mad faces. And then we might ask like, can everyone make an excited face? And they make their excited faces. And so that is kind of bringing awareness to like, what do these different emotions look like? Because if you think about it, like you know, emotions are very new for all children, especially on the younger end of things. So they might just not know what it looks like when someone is sad and needs a hug versus when they're angry and they need space. And it can be hard even for adults to discern those things in other people. It can be hard to just know by looking. But so we really encourage like practicing with that. And you can, you know, reverse it too. Like as a parent, you can make a face of, you know, whichever emotion you want to represent. And then you can ask them like, what do you think I'm feeling? Or like, can you guess what feeling I'm having? And then you can change it to something else and they can take another guess and you can just keep going back and forth. And that really helps them understand like different emotions look like different things. And these are the things I can kind of look out for when someone else is feeling, you know, XYZ. Or I can look at someone and try to know or try to discern what they're feeling so that I can then have the appropriate response to them. Because you see it all the time where like sometimes another child is maybe, you know, maybe they're angry and they want space, but the other child approaches them just like out of concern, out of like, oh, are you sad? Like, are you having a big feeling? Do you want a hug? And then the other child is like, no, like, give me space. And they get really upset. And, you know, they need space. So bringing that awareness really helps keep their responses to each other appropriate and supportive of each other. Another really helpful thing is to just observe others or to read books and ask questions. So this can be just like people watching with your child. Maybe you're at the park and you're watching the other children for a little bit and you can ask them like, oh, like, what do you think like that person's feeling? Or what do you think that person's feeling? I feel like you see like the full spectrum of emotions sometimes at the park or in other, you know, public settings. So that can be one really helpful tool. And then, like I said, with reading books, it might feel obvious to us, like what a character is feeling or what a character is experiencing. But it might not be as obvious to your child. So it can be really helpful to go through a story together and to ask like, oh, like, what do you think, you know, the bear is feeling? What do you think the bunny is feeling? What do you think these characters are feeling? What do you think they're thinking? And I do also want to emphasize, so like asking these questions can just kind of be like a continuous part of conversations. It doesn't have to be its own like specific kind of like lesson that you're giving them. it can be really organic and just like little things throughout the day. Like, say you're at the grocery store and you see like an infant in a cart crying. You can just like really casually like ask your child, like, oh, like, I see that baby's crying, like, how do you think they feel? And then they might just say, oh, I think the baby's sad, and then that can be it. Like, it doesn't have to be a big further conversation. It can be if you want it to be, or if that happens organically, it totally can be, but it can be really small. But having it kind of continuously be something that you talk about with your child is really helpful, just so it's something that's always kind of going on in their minds. And then celebrating the diversity and the differences we see in our world are so important. I think it's really important that we model through our own interactions with people, how to interact with the different people we may encounter, just so that children can see, like, oh, like, this person might be different, but that's okay. Like, I can still be kind towards this person. I can still be, as helpful and kind as I would be towards anyone else. So, like, say you see someone like in a wheelchair while you're going to the library, like holding the door open for them or making space for them, is really helpful for the child to understand, like, oh, like, people have differences, but we're all still people at the end of the day. And then I think one of the other most important things is creating and maintaining boundaries in your home, in your life, are so important. Maintaining the boundary especially. And, everyone can decide for themselves what the boundaries in their homes are, obviously. But following through on maintaining those boundaries is, I think, really, really important. Just so I think children often like look at adults as like these superheroes who like can do anything and nothing really phases them and they can handle, all the things. So, and that's why we see them like push boundaries and push against us, which is normal and totally developmentally appropriate, but we can best serve them by maintaining those boundaries so that when they go out into the world and other people have boundaries, that they know, like, this is serious, this is important, like, I do have to actually respect this person. Because I think it can be hard to make that differentiation between, like, oh, like, with mom and dad or with my teachers, like, it's not so important, but with my friends, it is important. I think if they understand and have that awareness that it is important to respect everyone, then it's easier when they go out into the world. And say, we see a lot with like hugs at school. We're really big on making sure that they ask for a hug before they give a hug, because someone might not want to be touched in that moment, or, maybe they will later, but maybe they just don't want a hug right now. And that's totally okay, and that's the boundary they're setting. So practicing that at home makes it easier for practicing it, in real life. And that kind of brings me to relationship skills. So this is kind of like the top of the pyramid, like the big thing that we're all working towards. And again, even as adults, I think we're all still working towards. We're all still navigating how to have, positive, healthy relationships in our personal lives, in our work lives, in our family lives, and all aspects. It's not something that we stop learning how to do. It's something that we are continuously practicing into our lives. But it's important to, start introducing when they're young so that it makes more sense and that it's easier to navigate as they get older. But relationship skills just refers to the ability to establish and maintain healthy and rewarding relationships with, diverse individuals and groups, so just whoever's in your life, And that involves the ability to communicate clearly, to listen well, to cooperate with others, negotiate conflict constructively, and seek and offer help when needed. Which I think it sounds like a lot, and you might be thinking like, oh, like my 3-year-old or my 2.5-year-old like doesn't know how to negotiate conflict, and that's okay. They are just learning how to do those things. But so again, going back to what we do at school, and as just a part of like Montessori philosophy, we call them grace and courtesy lessons. So we at school, at least, like are very intentional in teaching like, how do you disagree with someone? How do you agree with someone? How can you be respectful when giving your opinion, especially if you know it might be different than someone else's opinion? How can we work together? How do we decide who does what if we're working together? And then how do we know when we're successful? How do we know that we're done? How do we know that we've finished and we've accomplished our goal? What are we going to do if we make a mistake when we're trying to accomplish our goal? What if we don't agree with someone? Like, how can we navigate that in a way that's positive and respectful? Because at any age, but especially this age, like there's always going to be conflict, because they are learning these skills, and it's not something that they're like immediately proficient in. There's going to be conflict, there's going to be challenges, there's going to be different social situations to navigate. So we do those grace and courtesy lessons, again, at like a neutral time before anything's going on, just to have it kind of primed in their minds of like, okay, if I don't agree with someone and I want to tell them, like we give them the opportunity to practice, like how can I do that without being rude, or without being, how can I do that while being mindful of other people? And I think, it sounds tricky to do at that age, but they are totally capable of doing it. One of the biggest things that I've learned just through my experience, and that was always emphasized in my training, was the importance of observation. So I think as adults, we can feel really pressured to like step in as soon as we see conflict happening. And obviously every situation is different, and you all know your children best, and you can make your own judgments of like a situation you see. But what I've found a lot of times at school, at least, is when I start to hear kind of like an argument happening or a disagreement happening, a lot of the time, if I just step back and kind of give it a moment and just observe what they're doing, that they're able to resolve the conflict themselves if you just give them the space to talk it out. Obviously, there are times where you can tell, like, okay, this isn't productive, this isn't going anywhere, now it's time for me to step in and assist them in resolving their conflict. But especially as they get older, like our later 3s, 4s, and 5s, like they really are able to do those things on their own. And even some of like the younger students who are 2.5 and 3, they really are able to come to their own conclusions amongst themselves that might even be different than what I would have suggested. Like, because we have practiced so much, and because it's something we emphasize so much, they really do have the ability to do it. And it is easy to tell as an adult, like, when it is time to step in, or when it is time to give them guidance in their conversation. But I think just giving them the opportunity to do it themselves is so impactful, and it's really rewarding to see as an adult. But so some other ways that we can support their relationship skills are just like building that positive relationship with your child to foster their trust, having that like open, honest, continuous emotional conversation, I think makes it to where they feel comfortable coming to you with conflict that they're having. Say, someone was like not nice to them at school and they're telling you about it, then you're able to be that guide for them and able to help them through how they might navigate the situation. So like I said, like keeping emotions just in conversation, having check-ins with them, like checking in just randomly throughout the time you're spending with them, like how are you feeling right now? Even if they're not displaying anything that's showing like I'm feeling mad, sad, angry, etc. Just giving them the opportunity to check in with themselves and ask, like, how am I feeling right now? I think I'm feeling happy. I think I'm feeling hungry. I think I'm feeling, XYZ. Just exercising that emotional muscle is really helpful. And one big thing is carving out just like intentional, quality, like fun time together. I know it can be really easy to just like get caught up in the busyness of the day. You went to school, now we're picking you up, now we're picking up brother or sister, now we're going here, now we're going to the grocery store, now we're home, now we're doing, mealtime, bedtime routine. Like it can be really busy and it can be hard to really connect in that like kind of day-to-day like mundaneness. So I think having that quality time that is just like fun, we're just connecting, we're just spending time together, and that can look however you'd like it to look. But that really helps strengthen that bond and strengthen that connection. And it just allows space for conversation and opportunities to provide them with guidance on how to navigate different situations. Like say you're playing a board game together and, someone loses and someone wins. Like then we can talk about like, how does it feel to lose? How does it feel to win? What are things we can do if we're feeling that way about losing? You can really create these conversations in any kind of setting. But having that just like quality fun time makes it to where they feel really comfortable and they feel really connected with you so that they are able to have that trust and want to have those conversations. And then the very last part of it all is responsible decision making, which again, I think sounds like that's a big task for a 3-year-old to make a responsible decision. But they are totally capable of doing it. So that just kind of refers to the ability to make constructive choices about their behavior and their interactions with others based on kind of like all the things we've talked about. So safety concerns, social norms, like taking all of that into consideration into making their decisions. So we kind of want them to be able to like evaluate what are the consequences of what happens if I do this action or this action, and taking into consideration the well-being of themselves and of others. So like we want them to kind of be thinking in their minds, like, if I do this, what might the consequences be of that choice? How will other people react to my decision to do, XYZ? So once they've made a choice, we kind of want them to think through, like, what happened? Why did I do that? How did that make other people feel? And then what am I going to do now? Like, what is my appropriate response to those things? So supporting responsible decision making can look like, I think something that everyone kind of knows to do is provide options to choose from when making a decision and follow through on it. So say it's getting to be bedtime and they don't want to go to bed yet, so you give them the option of like, okay, before we go to bed, do you want to read a story or do you want, say, to have, a snack or something, or whatever that looks like for you guys? And so they make their choice and they say, I want to read a story first and then go to bed. And then so you choose the story, you read the story, and then it's really important again to just follow through on that and say, okay, we read the story, it's time for bed. And there might be a lot of resistance to that at first. It might look like, well, let's read one more story, or now I need a glass of water, or now can we do this first? Now can we do this first? But it's really important to just kind of hold firm on, you made the choice. I give you two choices, and you chose reading a book first. We've read the book. Now it's time for bed. So giving them options, and that can happen, in lots of different ways throughout the day. And then following through on, we did this. Now we're done. Now we're doing this next thing that we said we were going to do. Another helpful thing, so we want to support their decision making while also letting them deal with the natural consequences of their decisions. So this can look like a lot of different things, but I think kind of the most classic thing I can think of is, say you're at the park and they want to climb like a big rock wall, and you say like, okay, like you can climb the big rock wall, but you might fall. And sometimes they do fall, and that's how they learn, like, oh, I have to be really careful when I do this because I might fall. Obviously everything is case by case, and if they're going to do something dangerous, you're more than welcome to say, no, you're not doing that. You can get hurt, and I don't want you to get hurt. But letting them kind of explore and realize that, oh, like my actions do have consequences. Like if I do this, like something will happen, is really important for them to learn how to then in the future, like, okay, I'm going to make a different choice this time because last time I did this and then something that maybe I didn't like happened, and I don't want that again. So let me try something different. Giving them the space to experience those natural consequences is really important to helping them move forward to make better choices in the future. And like I said, so after they've made a choice, having a conversation about their choice, like say it did have a negative consequence, say they did fall and they did get hurt. Obviously you tend to them first and you get them to where they're feeling better, they're feeling calm. They're not, upset about being hurt anymore. They're feeling good. Then you're able to go back and say, like, what happened? Like, why did that happen? So, like, what happened? Well, I fell. And why did you fall? Because I was climbing too high or because I was climbing too fast. And then you can ask, like, okay, so, like, what can we do next time? And that might look like, next time I can go slower, or I can climb something smaller, something like that. But having the opportunity to analyze, at their own level, a situation and reflect on, different perspectives and repair the damage so that they're more likely to internalize the lesson that they can learn from these conflicts. So let's look at it in like a social setting. So say, they gave someone a hug without asking, and then the other person like pushed them away, and maybe they fell when they got pushed and they felt upset about that. Like you can ask like, well, what happened? And they might say like, I tried to give my friend a hug, but they pushed me. And then you can say like, well, how do you think that person felt when you hugged them? And you can even go as far as to ask like, how do you think they felt when you pushed them or when you hugged them without asking? And they can say like, well, maybe they felt upset that I didn't ask, or maybe they felt sad and they didn't want to hug, or maybe they felt angry and didn't want to hug, whatever. And then you can talk about like, okay, what do we want to check in with that friend? Like, do you maybe want to say I'm sorry to that friend? Do you want, what do we want to do to make that friend maybe feel better because we did something that they didn't like? And then they can kind of come to the conclusion on their own of what they might like to do. And allowing them to work through that process and to talk through that process helps them really internalize the message. Not that you might not have to have the conversation again, because children at this age do need to hear things kind of more than once to really take it in. But you do start to see a change after a few reminders or a few situations like that. Talking through it really allows them to really absorb the message, and you might see a difference in what they do the next time. But so that brings me to the end of my presentation. If you guys have any questions, I'm here to answer. I can't really see. I don't know if anyone's asked anything in the chat. Okay. Well, if you want to ask, feel free to type it in the chat and stuff and let me know. Or if you want to just unmute yourself or whatever, that is totally fine. And if you don't have any questions, that's totally fine too.
This was so valuable. Thank you so much, Kasi.
Thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed and got something from it.
Yeah, I loved hearing all that. Thank you.
Yeah. This is our biggest work right now. It's something children are learning. They're learning how to be in community, how to interact with others, and it's something that we're never really done learning about. So, yeah, I'm glad everyone likes it.
Yeah, thank you for putting this together. It's lots of great information.
Okay, thank you guys. Thank you for